guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to do a picking the right ship video, and this time specific to combat ships in 3.4. Now, it is worth noting that I'm only really talking about the flight-ready ships, and ships that you could really just take out the first day you got it, but it's also worth noting that the new flight model that's going to be coming in 3.5 means that some of these may end up changing a bit in the future. Combat teams kind of tends to be a little bit more dynamic than cargo and some of the other careers that are in the game, because combat has more of a dependency on the combat ability and flight models of the ship. So as we start to change that when 3.5 comes around, the recommendations here may change just a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the smaller ships and work our way up to the slightly larger ones, kind of like our standard approach with these videos. So starting off with one of the cheaper and smaller ships on the list, it's actually one of the newer options in the game, and that's being the Anvil Arrow. The Arrow isn't the fastest ship around compared to a few of the others, specifically with the afterburner speed, but SCM is pretty admirable on the ship. And while it's not exactly a racer, it does have amazing maneuverability. It handles just like you would want it to. It changes vectors very quickly due to its low mass. And to date, it's one of the hardest fights I've had over Jumptown against a proficient pilot that was in an Arrow. In fact, he was actually so hard to hit that we had 3 ships on him, and while we were able to land some shots, he ran the ship so well that he was able to stay positioned to avoid taking large amounts of damage, and with the way that it flies, it just doesn't hover in place while it's trying to hang one of those 90-degree vector change type of turns, so it was very hard to get that moment where you have a long time to just get sustained fire on it. Weapon-wise, the Arrow has 3 size 3 hardpoints, which means you can have 3 fixed size 3 weapons, which is a really great choice to maximize your damage. But another good alternative is opting to toss on some disruption weapons on the top turret to quickly kind of peel back the shields and really yield a lot of damage. Now, in addition to the solid weaponry, you get 4 missile racks, and you can bring 6 size 2 missiles along with the fight, which on a smaller and cheaper fighter is a pretty solid loadout. The Anvil is quickly becoming one of my favorite little fighters, and one that I would definitely recommend checking out. Up next on the list is the Aegis Sabre, and is what I would generally consider to be the kind of the gold standard or go-to for fighters that are in the game today, and is my personal go-to fighter of choice when I need to pull one out. It's a fast fighter. It carries a decent amount of hydrogen fuel. It handles well in atmosphere and in space. And while it does lack a little bit of the agility of some of the lighter fighters like the Gladius, it's hardly outclassed by them either. The weapon loadout on the Sabre is one of the biggest benefits to this ship because it has 4 size 3 hardpoints. And with the speed it brings along, you end up having a lot of options. For me, I've really enjoyed trying to close the distance and really running a size 3 distortion scatterguns and size 3 ballistic scatterguns to maximize damage and really kind of throw flux into the power plant, and then using the actual ballistics to deal a lot of damage. But running 4 size 3 tarantulas does a lot of damage too, and if you prefer the repeaters, the Panthers are really hard to argue with. You also come stock with 4 size 3 missiles, and while you really don't have a lot of them, the size 3 missiles are extremely powerful if you can get them to land. Now, you do want to make sure you're using them wisely and stripping down shields first and firing from closer range, but they do pack a punch when they hit. The Sabre also has 2 shields instead of 1, so you get a little bit of redundancy there, and depending on your power allocation, they do come back pretty quickly. The other thing to consider is that the armor isn't really implemented as a statistic on ships yet, and my gut says that where other ships are probably a little bit softer than they should be, I think the Sabre might also be a little bit more tanky than it should be, at least in comparison to other ships. But either way, it's a really resilient fighter that wears damage pretty well. There are 2 primary ways that you can run the Sabre, either with the stock stealth loadout to minimize your signature, or the preferred method of running military hardware, which is my preferred method, and maximizing the power output and just saying, you know what, I don't really care about the stealth ability here. I want to keep my weapons firing and my shields up. Either way, the Sabre is fierce and has to be on this list. Now, I'm a man who's going to admit when he's wrong, or at least has undersold a ship, and to prove it, I'm going to do that right now. The Reliant Core, I'm just kidding. The Core is still a garbage ship, but I did undersell the Freelancer Miss, and it's one that I thought was kind of going to be a one-trick pony or a little expensive for what it would do, or kind of just limited based on how missiles perform. But I was really wrong. The base Freelancer as itself is a capable ship in combat because it has 3 size 3 hardpoints on the sides that are on unmanned turrets, plus you have 2 weapons on the top turret to help, though I really dislike the turret placement on the hump in the back, preventing forward firing on the target that's dead ahead of you. That being said, though, the Miss is a ship that really takes it to the next level, using a medium power plant with 2 medium shields and having a larger health pool. It's just a really tanky ship. Weaponry-wise, it's really impressive. You end up getting 4 size 3 Mantis Gatlings on the side, and you get 2 size 2 Hellion scatterguns on the turret. Now, that does mean that you need to kind of utilize like a medium to closer range, which isn't really ideal on this ship. So you may be better off leveraging longer range Omni-Sky laser cannons. But many fighters are going to try and close the distance anyways, and the Gatlings are really fierce at close range, and scatterguns are obviously pretty good at that too. Now, where the real brunt of the punishment with this ship comes from, though, is it carries 28 size 3 missiles. Basically, you get 20 in the missile reloaders, 8 on the wings, meaning that the damage you deal through missiles can be absurdly high. And you can also stay in a dangerous area for an extended period of time based on the pure number of missiles you have. Now, it's a ship that when working with fighters as a part of a team really allows you to really kind of excel. And you can kind of lock down an entire area and chase a lot of people off or finish them off. I actually like the way the Freelancers fly, and though there's plenty of complaints out there about the visibility from the cockpit, the HUD does allow it for easy tracking and allow you to keep dealing damage to your targets. The Freelancer flies well, but it's not a super quick ship either when you talk about changing direction based on the mass, but if you're cautious in your approach, it becomes a minimal issue. Long story short, the Miss is a mean machine. Now, while the Sabre is easily my favorite or the go-to on this list, a very close second is going to be the Vanguard. It's long range with lots of quantum fuel. It makes jumping between planets a few times very easy, basically allowing you to stay out and do hunting for longer periods of time. Additionally, you bring a ton of firepower along because you have a size 5 hardpoint on the nose, which comes standard with a gimbaled Revenant ballistic Gatling gun. But I almost always swap that out for a size 5 laser cannon of some sort, like the M7A, which has very long range, does a lot of damage, and has pips that really closely line up with the quad cannons on the nose, which is going to be 4 size 2 MVSA laser cannons, and are some of the highest DPS weapons in that size range, which means you have a ton of forward-facing firepower. And when you add to that the 2 size 2 sawbucks on the turret, you're throwing a lot more damage down the field than a lot of other ships. And really, without the line of fire issues that the Freelancers have, it makes it a really kind of tough, combat machine. Now, this is an important factor because the Vanguard is large enough that, smaller fighters can end up being a little bit of a problem. Though if you're able to really kind of have enough control to try and keep your targets in front, it doesn't make them too bad, especially when you try and break off the circle strafe fights or with somebody actually chasing you, utilizing reverse strafe to kind of separate yourself from the engagement a little bit. But having the turret manned certainly helps if you can keep their line of fire on target. Now, in addition to the large and powerful weaponry, you also have 4 size 3 missiles and 8 size 2 missiles, meaning you can bring a significant missile output along or swap the size 2 for more size 3 missiles to maximize your output. Smaller fighters typically are going to be faster and more maneuverable, but the larger components and health pool mean that the durability on the Vanguard is extremely high, and you have a lot of flexibility in engaging fighters, mid-sized ships, or even dealing damage to larger ships like Constellations and Hammerheads, where smaller fighters wouldn't be able to make the same dent. It really is one of the more well-rounded options in the game right now from the combat perspective, and one that I love to fly. Now, the final ship I wanted to recommend as part of this takes on a slightly different methodology, being the Aegis Retaliator Bomber. The Tally brings 6 size 9 torpedoes along, which have excellent range and deal a ton of damage. With larger ships like the Constellations, Hammerheads, Starfarers, and more that are coming into the game, having the ability to lob large damage torpedoes at a target is a huge perk. And while the Retaliator doesn't really have much in the way of pilot-controlled guns until we end up getting the AI blades that are going to let you kind of automate some of that, it recently did get a buff to its turret weapons. Now, the Tally's always had 5 turrets dotting the outside of the ship, providing excellent coverage, but prior to the recent update, it only had 2 size 1 weapons on every one of those hardpoints, which was hardly an effective loadout. Now, 3 of the turrets have 2 size 3 broadsword ballistic cannons, and the other 2 have 2 size 2 Scorpion Gatling guns, which is a much more impressive loadout and almost makes this like a little miniature Hammerhead type of ship, meaning that you can do a great job of alpha strike ability using your torpedoes and protecting your ship, plus in other areas, and you end up having the gunners that can actually now be effective against other ships. It's a fun ship to fly and is now a fun ship to multi-crew while actually providing some good results. Now, the last thing I wanted to add to this, since not all of these ships are available for sale right now, is that there's several others that are not on the list but are great options too. The Gladius is fast, has good weaponry, and it's a hard-to-hit ship, plus it's just one of my favorite designed ships in the game. The Avenger has a lot of flexibility in roles, but if you need a combat ship that can do other tasks as well, it's a very proficient flyer and is very low priced. And finally, the Constellation Andromeda sort of matches that idea with the ability to do cargo, multi-crew, carry a rover, and it has a lot of missiles, plus some larger pilot-controlled weaponry, plus turrets to allow for greater damage, even though it's easy for fighters to kind of stay out of the line of fire unless the turrets are manned. Long story short, there's a lot of options out there that allow for combat to take place. Some are available now, or at limited times only, but there are some that I feel better about at different times. So if you guys have ships that you want to add to the list, please go ahead and put them in the comments. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for more, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.